Chapter 8: Energy Balance and Body Composition. These are your learning objectives for this chapter. Energy balance. Energy in equals energy out. When this is the case, your energy is in balance and your weight remains stable. Imbalance causes weight changes, not simply fat changes. Quick changes in body weight are not just fat stores. Rapid weight gain or loss includes some fat, large amounts of fluid, and some lean tissue like muscle. Water is about 60% of body weight, so retention or loss greatly influences your weight. Excess energy gets stored as fat. Fat can be used for energy between your meals. The classic rule that people think of is that 1 pound of fat equals 3,500 calories. And that is mostly true, but there are some limitations. There are differences with gender and with weight. Body composition differs greatly between men and women, and for obese and lean people. The calorie deficit needed for weight loss is relatively larger for women than men, and for obese than lean people. Measuring food energy. Food provides the energy in part of the equation. Direct measure of the food's energy value. This you would use a Baum calorimeter. A Baum calorimeter measures energy in the form of heat as food burns. It is a direct measure of food's energy value. An indirect measure of energy released is to measure the oxygen consumed. Calorie calculations. This is calories per grams. If you recall, there were 4 calories per gram provided by carbohydrates and by protein, and fat provides 9 calories per gram. Calories are units of heat energy. Hunger, satiation, and satiety. Satiation tells us to stop eating, while satiety reminds us to not start eating again. This slide shows factors that influence hunger, desire to eat, satiation, and satiety. Examples include physiological influences like hunger hormones, sensory influences like seeing or smelling food, things like social interactions and time of day, as well as triggers produced by food in the GI tract. Factors that influence eating. Appetite prompts a person to eat or not eat. Hunger is the body's physiological response to a need for food. Overriding hunger and satiety. Emotions, be it boredom, anxiety, stress, can influence your desire to eat. You also have external cues like the time of day, availability of food, seeing food, tasting food, things like that. Environmental influences, things like large portions, may influence you to eat more than you would have otherwise, or having your favorite foods available to you might cause you to eat more. Cognitive influences, be it memories or social interactions, as well as disordered eating. And this is when you have a disordered relationship with food. Eating disorders like anorexia nervosa require tremendous discipline to ignore hunger cues. All of these factors can promote overeating and therefore can promote weight gain. Nutrient composition for sustained satiation and satiety. Protein is most satiating, which provides this feeling of fullness. It's more satiating than carbohydrates or fat. Low energy density. So low energy density means that it provides lower calories or energy, and these tend to be your higher fiber foods. And these tend to be more satisfying by filling the stomach and delaying the progress and absorption. So it helps make you feel a little bit more full. High-fat foods have strong satiety signals. Cholecystokinin. While high-fat foods are flavorful and entice people to eat more, once fat enters the small intestine, cholecystokinin is released and signals satiety, which is to not start eating again. So it may hold you over for a longer period of time. Hypothalamus. This is the control center for eating, and it integrates nerve and hormonal messages about energy intake, expenditure, and storage. Again, satiety versus satiation. Satiation tells us to stop eating. Satiety reminds us to not start eating again. I ask you to pause this presentation for a moment and see if you can match these appropriately. So on the left, you have A, hunger, which matches with D, physiological response. B, satiety, matches with A, after a meal, and also matches with E, determines how much time passes between meals. C, satiation, matches with B, feeling of fullness occurring during a meal, as well as C, determines how much food is consumed during the meal. Energy out. You have basal metabolism, which includes activities to keep the body functioning. This varies based on weight, lean tissue, age. About 2/3 of the energy expended is the body's basal metabolism. Examples include your lungs, inhaling and exhaling, your heart beating, kidneys filtering the blood, etc. The second one is physical activity, and this is voluntary muscle movement. This is the most variable and readily influenced component. Weight, lean muscle, and the type of activity impact the amount of energy needed. Physical activity is the most changeable and therefore can significantly influence weight gain or weight loss. Third, you have thermic effect of food. The amount of energy needed to digest, absorb, transport, store, and metabolize food. It accounts for about 10% of energy intake. Varies based on meal frequency, size, and macronutrient composition. As you eat, GI tract muscles speed up, digestive enzymes activate, and some require energy to be used. This requires energy and produces heat known as TEF, or thermic effect of food. These are the three main components of energy expenditure in the body. Question number 1, 2/3 of energy expended is through blank to keep the body functioning. Example, breathing. Answer being basal metabolism. Factors that affect the BMR. I won't read each of these to you, but some highlights are things like age. So lean body mass diminishes with age, which ends up slowing the BMR. Height, in tall, thin people, the BMR tends to be higher. And then growth. In children, adolescents, and pregnant women, the BMR is higher. And this here is a continuation of the last slide. Adaptive thermogenesis. This is the energy or extra work the body has to do to adapt to extremes. Examples include extreme cold, starvation, or trauma. The amount expended is extremely variable and therefore is not included in energy requirement calculations. It's very variable and very specific to the individual. Components of energy expenditure. The amount of energy expended differs for each individual, but usually basal metabolism is the largest component and thermic effect of food is the smallest. In estimating energy requirements, DRI developed equations that consider the following influences on BMR. Gender. Women generally have lower energy needs than men due to less lean body mass. Growth. Infants, children, pregnant women, etc., will have greater needs because they're going through periods of growth. Age. This changes with age. Needs decline as you get further into adulthood. Physical activity. Factors are used to help calculate physical activity since not everyone does the same exercise, as well as the intensity, length of time, those types of things. Body composition and body size. Energy needs are higher in people who are taller, and the more a person weighs, the more energy is expended on BMR. Body mass index, or BMI. BMI scores are characterized by underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obese. BMI is a measure of relative weight for height. So you can see the calculation there in orange. A healthy weight range according to the BMI is about 18.5 to 24.9. BMI does not assess body composition, so very muscular athletes may fall into an overweight or even obese categories despite actually being very healthy and very fit. Ideally, a person will have enough body fat to meet basic needs, but not so much that it increases their disease risk. So BMI definitely has its downfalls. It's not a perfect system, but it's inexpensive. It's a fairly easy calculation, and it can give you kind of a general idea of where you fall. Here's the BMI table. You can see it breaks it down. Underweight, you can see, is that first column in yellow, and that's if the BMI is less than 18.5. Healthy weight is in blue, and that range is 18.5 to 24.9. Overweight, 25 to 29.9, and obese is categorized as greater than or equal to 30. Body fat and its distribution. So this chart here essentially is just showing how much body fat on average would be there for a man versus a woman at the same BMI. So in general, women have roughly 12% more body fat than men at the same BMI. Body fat and its distribution. Important information for assessing disease risk. How much of the weight is fat and where is the fat located? The ideal amount of body fat depends on the individual person. You have visceral fat, and that is stored around the organs of the abdomen. It's also known as central obesity or upper body fat. And then there is subcutaneous fat, which is stored directly under the skin. Central obesity significantly and independently of BMI contribute to heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and related deaths. Subcutaneous fat stored directly under the skin does not. Waist circumference. This is an indicator of central obesity and its associated health risks. Women with waist circumferences greater than 35 inches and men with waist circumferences greater than 40 inches may have an increased risk of central obesity and associated health risks. Apple and pear body shapes compared. Apple, upper body fat, more common in men and is associated with chronic disease. Pear refers to lower body fat and it's more common in women and not usually associated with chronic diseases. In healthy weight people, some visceral fat protects the organs of the abdomen. In overweight people, excess visceral fat increases the risks of diseases. So while you will have some fat to protect the organs, excess visceral fat surrounding the organs and abdomen can increase your risk of disease. I encourage you to pause the presentation momentarily and see if you can match these. The column on the left, visceral fat and subcutaneous fat, each match with 2 on the right. So A, visceral fat, matches with B, significantly contributes to heart disease and diabetes, as well as C, central obesity. B, subcutaneous fat, matches with A, associated with lower risk of heart disease, and then D, fat around the hips and thighs. I encourage you to pause the presentation momentarily and see if you can answer this yourself. A waist circumference of greater than 40 inches for men and greater than 35 inches for women is an indicator of fat distribution and central obesity. Health risks associated with body weight and body fat. Body weight and fat distribution correlate with disease risk and life expectancy. Correlations are not causes. The correlation shows that there is greater likelihood of developing disease if you have a higher BMI or waist circumference. Not all overweight or obese people will develop disease the same way not all normal weight people will live long, healthy lives. For the most part, BMIs between 18.5 and 24.9 have relatively few weight-related disease risks. If above or below this range, health risks increase. So you want to note that J-shaped curve. We talked a lot about overweight and obesity, but there are health risks associated with being underweight as well. Risks associated with being underweight include fighting against wasting diseases. Underweight people have a harder time fighting against diseases like cancers or digestive disorders. Menstrual irregularities and infertility. Women may lose or have irregular periods, become infertile, or give birth to unhealthy infants. Osteoporosis and bone fractures. Underweight people are at a greater risk for developing weaker bones. Healthy weight gains may provide an energy reserve and provide protective nutrients against this risk. There are so many health risks associated with obesity, it is now considered a disease. Health risks include diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, sleep apnea, some cancers, and infertility. It's also possible to be more likely to be disabled in later years of life. Costs. Obesity-related illnesses cost the country billions of dollars, about $147 billion per the text. Billions more are lost in workplace productivity, and it causes early death. Cardiovascular disease and associated high cholesterol and blood pressure are associated with obesity. Central obesity increases risk for heart attack and stroke. Weight loss helps lower the risk by reversing atherosclerosis, decreasing blood pressure, and decreasing cholesterol. As for diabetes, central body fat cells are associated with increased insulin resistance and therefore diabetes. Weight gain of greater than 10 pounds after age 18 doubles the risk of getting diabetes. As for cancer, it seems chronic inflammation associated with obesity may increase cancer risk. Weight loss decreases inflammation and therefore may decrease cancer risk. Other considerations. Obesity can lead to chronic inflammation, which can lead to chronic diseases. The combination of inflammation and ectopic fat, this is the excess fat in other locations than adipose tissue, results in insulin resistance, high blood glucose, abnormal blood lipids, and high blood pressure. This cluster of symptoms is known as metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome increases risk for diabetes, hypertension, and atherosclerosis.